A corrupt bully struck an 80-year-old grandfather across the face inside a small mountain diner, sending him crashing to the floor in front of everyone. Plates rattled, forks froze in midair, and not a single soul dared to move. The room held its breath as the bully smirked, believing he owned this town, believing age meant weakness and fear meant control. He thought no one would ever stand up to him, but he made one mistake, a fatal one. He didn't know who that old man was, and he didn't know that just moments later the door would open, and a United States Special Operations captain, the old man's grandson, would walk in through the snow with his battle-trained K9 at his side, forged in loyalty and war. What happened next would shake this town to its core and prove one truth. Evil survives only until a good man decides to stand. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Snow drifted across Iron Ridge in heavy, silent sheets, swallowing the pine-lined road and muffling the world beneath a blanket of white. Inside the small timber-walled diner called Mountain Hearth, warmth gathered like a fragile secret against the winter's bite. Soft amber lights glowed through frosted windows, reflecting off rows of polished pine tables, and the smell of cinnamon coffee mingled with the comforting scent of firewood smoldering in the iron stove. At a corner table sat Samuel Hayes, 80 years old, shoulders a little stooped, but dignity still present in the steady line of his spine. His hair, once the color of iron he worked as a blacksmith decades ago, had turned silver, yet his eyebrows remained thick and strong above deep-set hazel eyes. His weather-worn hands, veined and scar-etched from a lifetime forging horseshoes and rail hinges and fixing townsfolk's tools, rested around a ceramic mug like he was holding onto warmth and memory both. His skin bore the pale tone of someone who had spent more years under mountain skies than under roofs, and the faint tremor in his fingers betrayed age, but not fragility of spirit. Samuel had lived through lean years, through the death of a wife taken too early by winter fever, through raising a son alone and then watching his grandson grow strong and honorable. Today, he simply wanted peace, a hot drink, and the quiet hum of a town still waking. Across the room, behind the counter, Emily Carter, 23, rearranged a stack of fresh napkins to hide her nerves. Emily was a petite girl with soft brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail that always seemed one sigh away from slipping free. Her freckles dusted across a pale nose and cheeks flushed pink from repeatedly stepping outside to brush snow off the front steps. She had bright, earnest blue eyes and hands that trembled slightly when she was scared, not out of weakness, but because she felt deeply. People knew her as gentle, polite, and perhaps too trusting. She'd grown up in Iron Ridge, working here since she was 17 to help her single mother pay hospital bills. Life had taught her kindness could be heavy, but she still carried it willingly. The restaurant door flew open with a violent gust of wind, a bell clanging sharply. Snowflakes scattered across the floor as Derek Collins stomped in. Derek was in his early 50s, tall and broad-shouldered but thick around the middle, the kind of built-by-beer frame earned through years of entitlement rather than honest labor. His once blonde hair had thinned and retreated, leaving a dome with a red-tinged scalp. A trimmed beard could not disguise the hard angles of his jaw, nor the deep, permanent sneer etched into his mouth. His eyes, small, gray, and glinting with cruelty, scanned the room like a predator bored of weak prey. Derek had started as a contractor years ago, maybe with good intentions, but power had spoiled him. Rumors spoke of shady land deals and threats, disguised as business talk. In his mind, Iron Ridge existed to bend for him. Two men followed him in, Rick Dalton and Marty Kemp, both in their late 30s, both with the cold look of men accustomed to doing the wrong things for the wrong people. Rick, tall and hawk-faced, had a shaved head and a patchy beard, his brown eyes restless like a dog waiting for command. Marty, shorter, stockier, wore a greasy work jacket and had scarred knuckles and a smirk that suggested he enjoyed hurting people more than he admitted. Derek's heavy boots thudded across the wooden floor as he marched to Samuel's table. The diner grew still. The fireplace crackled, coffee steamed, yet every breath seemed suspended in fear. Samuel looked up, eyes calm, tired but firm, bracing against a storm he had long expected. "Well," Derek drawled, forcing cheerfulness like poison dipped in sugar. "Morning, old man. You've been ignoring my calls. Hard to believe with all that free time." Samuel's voice, though worn thin by years, remained steady. "You've called enough. My answer hasn't changed." Derek laughed low and ugly. "That lake property is wasted on you. Snow, silence, memories. What good are those to a man with one foot in the ground?" Samuel's fingers twitched on his mug. Pain flashed in his chest. Grief, anger, resignation. That land left him by his late wife was the last beautiful promise of their life together. "It's not for sale." Derek leaned closer, breath sour. "Everything's for sale." Then, more quietly, with menace poured into each syllable, "And I don't like being told no." Samuel felt Emily watching, her breath tight, ready but afraid. He saw her fear, and the old instinct inside him whispered, "Don't cause trouble for them." But some things were worth trouble. "I gave my word," he murmured, "to my family, and my word still means something." Derek's jaw clenched, pride bruised, ego bleeding. He reacted the way weak men always do, with violence. His arm whipped suddenly, the back of his hand slamming across Samuel's face. The crack sounded too loud in the cozy diner. Samuel fell from his chair, mug crashing and splintering on tile. Hot coffee splashed across the floor in his wool coat. A sharp sting blossomed across his cheek, spreading into a dull throb. The world tilted, blurred by age and shock. Emily gasped, hands to her mouth, but quickly lowered them when Derek's gaze flicked toward her. She bit her lip until it bled. "Do something," her heart screamed. "Don't die," her fear begged. Her hand slid to her phone beneath the counter, thumb trembling as she tapped record. No one moved. The only sound was Samuel's ragged breath and the quiet thud of snow against the window pane. Derek stood tall, chest heaving with dark satisfaction. Rick and Marty shifted, almost amused, like boys watching a fire they set grow bright. Samuel exhaled slowly, forcing his body still. Shame, anger, heartbreak, each emotion flared inside him like sparks off molten steel. He thought of the past, of promises made in soft whispers beside a lakeshore, of his grandson, his pride, of the oath he made to protect what mattered. It hurt, not just the blow, but the reminder that cruelty always found its way to the quiet. Outside, the wind howled, pushing snow sideways across the glass. Winter pressed close. And as Derek straightened his coat and smirked as though he had swatted a fly rather than struck a man, the bell above the door jingled again. Cold wind slipped in, curling around boots, and unseen footsteps approached. The storm was not finished. In truth, it had only just begun. The diner's bell chimed once, a brief, delicate sound swallowed instantly by the storm of tension inside the mountain hearth. The wooden door swung open, letting in a gust of snow-laced air before it closed again, and with it came Captain Ethan Hayes. Tall, broad-shouldered, and standing with the straight-backed posture only years of disciplined service could carve into a man, he wore a dark military winter jacket still dusted with wind-driven frost. His face was angular and chiseled, the square jaw lined with a short beard that hinted at weeks spent in harsh terrain without the luxury of comfort. His skin was weathered bronze from years overseas and in high-altitude training, a stark contrast to the cold that flushed his cheeks now. His hair, coal-black with a single streak of silver above his right temple, carried the quiet weight of battles fought, both those seen and those no one ever would. In his deep-set green eyes was a stillness, an eerie control, like a frozen lake, beautiful, calm, but hiding currents of unimaginable strength beneath. Beside him trotted Ranger, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois with an obsidian dark coat streaked with faint mahogany at the shoulders. The dog moved with the silent, watchful precision of a trained warrior. Muscles rippled beneath his fur, ears pricked forward, amber eyes assessing threat and environment in one sweep. A small scar near his left foreleg told the quiet story of a mission overseas, shrapnel from a blast where he had shielded a fallen soldier. Ranger had no patience for cruelty. He had seen too much of it in dusty, war-torn villages and frozen ridgelines where Ethan once commanded a reconnaissance team. Together, soldier and dog were a pair carved by conflict and loyalty. Ethan's eyes found his grandfather instantly. Samuel Hayes, trembling slightly on the floor, cheek flushed where Derek struck him, coffee pooling near his hand. For a heartbeat, Ethan did not move. Something primal and ancient flickered behind his eyes. Not rage, but a deeper, colder instinct. The kind that protected villages under moonlight and held frontiers alone against wolves and bullets alike. Ranger felt it too. A soft growl rumbled from deep within his chest as he stepped forward, placing himself between Samuel and danger, body lowered in a poised, deadly crouch. Derek Collins stiffened, his bravado leaking out like air from a punctured tire. "What's this?" he muttered, trying for arrogance but landing closer to a whisper. His cronies shifted uneasily, sensing the shift in power. The room seemed smaller now, as though walls leaned in to listen. Ethan finally moved, slow, deliberate. His voice came low, controlled, iron hard. "Ranger, guard." The single command rolled out like frost-coated steel. Ranger obeyed instantly, planting himself like a living shield in front of Samuel, gaze locked on Derek's throat as though measuring the distance, calculating outcomes. At that moment, the front door opened again, and Sheriff Robert Knox walked in, or rather, swaggered in. Knox was a man in his mid-50s with a belly pressing against a sheriff's jacket that had once fit him proudly but now strained at the buttons. His hair, thinning and slicked back, tried to hide his scalp, and his mustache was neatly trimmed but could not soften the bitterness etched across his face. Years ago, he had been different, fresh-faced deputy, proud and loud about protecting Iron Ridge. But power curdled him. Whispers of small bribes and favors grew into something darker. His pale blue eyes held the dull sheen of someone who had learned to ignore guilt for convenience. Knox tried to mask his discomfort with a lazy grin. "Captain Hayes," he drawled, voice stretched thin like cheap leather. "Didn't expect you back so soon. Heard you were up north training or some such." Ethan didn't look at him. He knelt beside Samuel, gently lifting him to his feet with care that stood in stark contrast to the brutality moments earlier. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. Samuel shook his head, breath shaky, though pride and pain warred in his gaze. Ethan turned only then, slowly, eyes settling on Knox with the stillness of a predator who has chosen a target. He assaulted an elderly man. Knox shrugged, uncomfortable, scanning the room for support that never came. "No one saw anything. Old man must have slipped. Happens." Emily Carter's breath hitched. Her phone lay under the counter, still recording. Her fingers twitched. She dared not move, but her heart hammered so loud she wondered if someone would hear. Derek found a scrap of courage, forced a smirk. "Yeah, Captain. Old folks fall. Gravity's got no mercy, right?" Ethan didn't blink. Gravity didn't put that handprint on his face. A hush settled again, thick enough to choke. Knox cleared his throat, suddenly sweating. "Captain, best you head home. No need to stir trouble." Ethan's jaw flexed once. He held Knox's gaze until the sheriff looked away. "Trouble is already here," he said quietly, voice soft but heavy, like a gun cocking in the dark. "And you allowed it." Ranger barked once, sharp, controlled, commanding, causing Derek to flinch. Chairs scraped as a few diners pretended to busy themselves with menus. Outside, wind rattled icicles against the window, a reminder of cold worlds beyond. Ethan steadied Samuel fully, then helped him to his seat, hand lingering in reassurance. The diner crackled with tension, firelight flickering across faces frozen between fear and relief. Derek and his men began backing toward the door, eyes darting. Knox hesitated, struggling between ego and caution, then turned sharply to leave, forcing authority into each step. But Ethan's gaze followed them like a silent vow. Samuel breathed slowly, whisper shaking, "You shouldn't have come back this way." Ethan squeezed his shoulder gently. "I came back to spend time with Faye. You not watch you be hurt." The words were quiet, tender, but beneath them something hard was forming, a storm gathering beneath calm waters. Ranger rested near Samuel's feet, watchful, tail still. Ready. Ethan's eyes briefly traveled the room, landing on Emily's frightened but determined expression. She quickly looked away, clutching her phone like a lifeline. He could tell. She had seen, and she had proof. He exhaled, steady. "We're going home." As he guided Samuel toward the door, Ranger at heel, every step carried a promise. This wasn't finished. Snow howled outside, swirling like fate around them as they stepped into the storm. Behind them, Derek paused at the doorway, swallowing hard, goatish confidence shaken. Sheriff Knox muttered curses under his breath, pulling his collar up against the cold. Emily's fingers shook as she saved the recording and slipped the phone into her apron. And in the quiet hush left behind, the mountain town seemed to hold a breath, sensing a fracture widening, soon beyond repair. The wind slammed the door shut behind Ethan, rattling the glass like a warning. Change had arrived in Iron Ridge, not with noise, but with footsteps in the snow and a soldier's quiet fury. And somewhere deep within those white-coated hills, someone unseen watched the diner through a fogged windshield, breath ghosting glass, engine idling, as if waiting for a signal only they could hear. The storm had only just begun. Night settled over Iron Ridge with the heavy hush that only deep winter can bring. Snow fell in thick, soft flakes, drifting like slow descending feathers from a sky the color of polished slate. The pines bowed under the weight, branches creaking faintly in the cold as if the forest itself whispered warnings through the frozen hush. Inside a cabin at the forest's edge, warm lamplight glowed against wood-paneled walls, reflecting off rifles mounted neatly above a stone hearth and a handful of framed photos of mountains, military units, and one boy growing into a man under the watchful eyes of duty and family. This cabin, sturdy but quiet, held the kind of peace that arrives only after storms, and tonight that peace trembled. Ethan Hayes sat at a solid oak table near the window, sleeves rolled, breath steady. Every movement was precise, deployed like a soldier still in theater. In front of him lay a compact military radio unit, matte black and scarred by rough terrain, its antenna out like a coiled snake sensing threat. He turned a dial slowly, listening to the static-filled hiss, adjusting frequencies until only silence remained. His jaw tightened. Silence could be louder than noise, especially when the world expected chaos. His mind replayed the diner, the handprint on his grandfather's face, the fear in bystanders' eyes, the trembling quiet of injustice tolerated. Buried deep beneath discipline and steel, a pulse of fury beat in rhythm with the storm outside. Behind him, Samuel Hayes sat on an old leather armchair wrapped in a wool blanket. His cheek carried a swollen red mark, and though his body showed strain, his eyes glimmered with familiar pride and stubbornness. Age had frayed his bones but left his spirit untouched. He wasn't asking for pity. He was fighting the weight of feeling like a burden, that dangerous ache that comes when a man who once lifted towns feels the world leaning instead upon him. He wouldn't admit it, but the blow hurt less than the humiliation. Still, watching his grandson move like a ghost forged in battle stirred a quiet reassurance. Ethan returned, and the house felt safe again. Ranger, the Malinois, slipped through the room like a sentry born from shadow. Snow clung to his fur in small crystals, glistening like frost on midnight stone. His breath billowed in faint puffs, ears pricked, muscles taut. The dog's instincts never rested. Once he had patrolled mountain passes far from here, scanning horizons for enemies who hid behind broken walls and tree lines. Tonight, he stalked the edges of the cabin walls, nose twitching, leaving prints in snow that filled in almost as fast as he stepped. Ranger was lean, hardened, and alive in every nerve, an apex guardian shaped by loyalty and violence alike. Ethan finished checking the last window latch, fingers grazing frost-rimmed panes. Every lock held, every sensor blinked faintly green. Technology and instinct blended in him. He trusted little but prepared. For all. Then he froze. His gaze slid beyond his reflection into the darkness outside. There, between black tree trunks, a faint red ember glowed. Not like a campfire, but lower, more menacing, steady as a lazy heartbeat. A running engine. A breath of exhaust curled in the cold. A black SUV sat tucked against the tree line, just far enough to feign coincidence, just close enough to betray purpose. Its headlights were off, windows dark, tires half buried in snow like an animal crouched to spring. A shape moved inside, a silhouette, bulky shoulders, a hand bringing something to its mouth. Then a small crackle of radio static drifted faintly across the frozen stillness. Someone was watching, someone who thought patience meant power. Ethan's shoulders eased downward, the subtle dropping of a predator lowering into readiness. He whispered only 4 words, low, steady, a ghost of a vow rather than threat. "We're not prey, not tonight." Samuel's voice quivered faintly, brittle with concern. "Son." But Ethan only offered a quiet nod, that steady reassurance he had mastered through years of keeping soldiers alive in places that had known him. "I know. Rest." The old man sank back, torn between fear and faith. He had seen Ethan in his uniforms, medals pinned, eyes hard from horizons he prayed never to witness. Yet seeing him now, unarmored but lethal, rattled him as much as it comforted him. He whispered a silent prayer, not for Ethan, but for those foolish enough to provoke him. A soft knock on the door shattered the stillness. 3 taps, gentle, uncertain. Ranger stiffened instantly, body coiling, teeth flashing in a soundless snarl. Ethan motioned sharply. The dog froze mid-tension, silent but poised. Ethan approached the door, staying off-center, hand brushing the grip of a compact handgun lying on a marble-topped bureau. He opened the door slowly. Standing there, bundled in a long navy coat dusted white with snow, was Mara Jensen, the town's only nurse practitioner. She was in her early 40s, tall and willowy, with sandy blonde hair tied in a messy braid that peeked beneath a wool hat. Her skin was pale from years of mountain winters, and faint laugh lines framed warm brown eyes that tonight flickered with worry instead. She had always been gentle and sharp-tongued in equal measure, a woman who once planned to study in a big city hospital until her father fell ill, and she stayed, because loyalty anchored her deeper than ambition ever could. She clutched a worn leather medical bag, lips stiff with cold and concern. "I heard what happened," she whispered, breath-shaky clouds. "I came to check on him. On Samuel." Ethan stepped aside wordlessly. He respected Mara. She was one of few in Iron Ridge who knew hardship without letting it curdle her heart. She knelt by Samuel, soft fingers tracing his cheek lightly. "That man hasn't learned manners in 50 years, she muttered. "One day it'll cost him." Her voice carried steel beneath kindness, a mountain spirit disguised in quiet hands. Samuel tried to smile. "I've survived worse." Mara arched a brow. "And pride never needed stitches, but it sure begs for them sometimes." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. He watched the SUV instead, breath steady. Mara followed his gaze and her expression tightened. "They're watching, aren't they?" "Yes." "And you're not calling the sheriff?" she asked, though the question was already answered. Ethan's stare never left the dark. "Corruption wears badges here." Mara swallowed, understanding. "Then, I hope you're armed." He didn't need to answer. Outside, the SUV engine revved once, low and deliberate, like a predator growling through glass. Ranger paced near the window, tail stiff, hackles raised. Snow thickened, erasing distance but not threat. Ethan turned down the lamp, plunging the cabin into softer darkness. "Lights off," he murmured. "We watch. We wait." Mara's voice came quiet. "And if they come?" Ethan's eyes glinted like a winter blade drawn at midnight. "Then they picked the wrong door." Ranger let out a low rumble of agreement. The SUV stayed. The storm deepened, and Iron Ridge held its breath as if the trees themselves sensed war creeping under snow. The old chapel stood at the edge of Iron Ridge like a forgotten hymn in stone, its steeple rising against a sky heavy with snow. Wind whispered around cracked stained glass panes, pushing flurries through barely sealed seams, carrying the cold into the dim sanctuary where flickering candlelight fought to keep shadows at bay. Ethan stepped inside quietly, boots crunching on frost-dusted stone. Ranger followed at his heel, the Malinois alert, head low, ears tuned to every creak of wood, every brush of wind. The chapel smelled like pine oil, wet wool, and a kind of old sorrow, as if grief clung to the beams like dust. At the front pew sat Margaret Knox, wife of the mayor. In her early 50s, she had the bearing of someone once accustomed to grace and sunlight. She wore a long camel-colored wool coat cinched around a slender waist and leather gloves lined with fur. Her silver blonde hair, swept into a low chignon, framed a face that once held youthful vivacity but now carried fatigue like a second skin. Her blue-gray eyes, rimmed faintly red, looked up when Ethan approached. Not fearful, but hollow with months or perhaps years of internal war. She was the kind of woman who had grown up believing power meant safety, only to learn too late that corruption rots the foundation beneath silk and marble. Ethan stopped at a distance, studying her the way soldiers study battlefields. Every tremor, every breath, every flicker of guilt and resolve. His face remained unreadable, only the faint tightening at his jaw betraying tension. "Mrs. Knox." Her breath left her in a soft, foggy exhale. "Thank you for coming." Her voice trembled, but her shoulders did not. She clasped her handbag tightly, plain leather, scuffed at the edges, mismatched with her otherwise polished attire. A woman trying to blend into humility after years of privilege. Ranger sat beside Ethan, silent but imposing, eyes locked on the chapel doors and aisles, sensing unease. Margaret's gaze flicked down to him, and something in her expression softened, fear replaced by a flicker of gratitude, as though she knew loyalty when she saw it. "You didn't tell me much," Ethan replied, voice low and calm, but edged with warning. His breath came steady, controlled, the kind of calm learned behind rifles and in briefing rooms where one wrong word changed destinies. "I had to be careful," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder though the chapel was empty. "They watch everything now." Her gloved hand shook as she reached into her handbag. For a heartbeat, Ethan tensed, reflex, instinct, muscle memory, then relaxed when she produced not a weapon but a small black USB drive, the kind used by people who hide things no one else must ever see. She held it like a confession. This has everything. Bank transfers, fake title documents, threat messages, audio recordings." Her voice grew steadier. "The land deals, the harassment, the intimidation, years of it. My husband, Sheriff Kent, Derek's men, they used this town like it belonged to them." Ranger let out a soft rumble, sensing the heaviness in her words. "I knew," she breathed, guilt dawning in her eyes like a bruise. "God help me, I knew. I thought it was business, just politics. But after what happened to your grandfather," her voice cracked, she steadied it. "I can't be part of this anymore." Ethan accepted the drive carefully, like handling live ammunition. "Why now?" She met his gaze, an honest stare, stripped of pretense. "Because men like my husband only understand power, and yesterday they saw a man walk into that diner who looked like he could burn their entire kingdom without raising his voice. And because your grandfather stood tall when the world turned away." She swallowed. "I've been silent too long." Silence followed, heavy as snowfall. Ethan's expression did not soften, but something behind his eyes shifted. Acknowledgement, maybe even respect. "Once this starts, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "I want to go home again, the real kind." Ethan nodded once. "Then I'll handle the rest." He stepped back, pulling a compact encrypted tablet from inside his coat, military issue, Mété titanium, edges scarred. He slotted the USB in with measured precision. Ranger shifted closer, ears pricked. Lines of encrypted files streamed across the screen. Audio, scanned documents, spreadsheet logs. Ethan transmitted them across a locked military network, fingers working swiftly, jaw clenched. Margaret watched him like someone watching fate unfold in real time. "Is it safe?" "As safe as anything can be," he murmured, eyes on the data transfer. His voice deepened, a quiet force. "From here on, no one has to fear these people anymore." Wind howled outside like a distant scream. The last file finished sending. Ethan removed the drive, snapped it in half, then crushed the circuit board beneath his gloved thumb with a decisive crack. Margaret exhaled shakily. Relief, fear, freedom. "Go home," Ethan said gently but firmly. "Act normal, say nothing. By the time they realize, it'll be too late." Margaret nodded, tears shining without falling. "Thank you, Captain Hayes." He inclined his head slightly. "Stay safe." She paused at the chapel doors, breath trembling in the candlelight. "Ethan, be careful. They will not go quietly." Then she slipped into the snow-dark evening, swallowed by wind and falling dusk. Ranger stood at attention. Ethan rested a hand briefly between the dog's shoulders, grounding himself. The chapel's candles flickered harder as a gust slammed the doors. Thunder? No, just wood settling under cold. Yet the air felt charged. War had moved from shadows into light, and somewhere in the storm engines rumbled. The SUV hadn't left. Others might soon come. The town slept unaware, but Ethan. Hayes did not sleep. Not tonight. This wasn't just vengeance anymore. It was reclamation, honor, justice, home. And if Iron Ridge demanded a reckoning, Ethan would deliver it. Whatever came through the snow next, he would be ready. Dawn crept over Iron Ridge beneath a hushed sky of pale pearl and morning frost. Snow blanketed the streets in a clean sheet of unbroken white. the world holding a breath before the day's first footstep disturbed it. No blaring sirens cut the cold air, no frantic engines shattered the stillness. Justice arrived quietly, like snow, soft, unstoppable, absolute. Black SUVs rolled down Main Street in a steady line, their matte surfaces nearly blending into the winter dawn. The convoy bore the implacable weight of federal authority. FBI agents in dark tactical jackets, Homeland Security operatives layered in winter armor, and 2 specialized counter-corruption task force units whose faces bore the unshakable calm of men and women accustomed to toppling kingdoms built on arrogance. At the head of the group walked Special Agent Isabella Marlowe, a tall woman in her early 40s with sharp cheekbones and skin the color of warm honey beneath the cold light. Her hair, jet black and pinned neatly, framed a face that rarely showed emotion. Years of dismantling political crime rings carved discipline into her features, leaving no softness except in the rare spark of compassion in her dark eyes. She had the gait of someone always in control. Straight spine, purposeful stride, every step a verdict. Marlowe's crisp voice cut across the chilled air. No noise. We sweep quiet and we sweep clean. Behind her marched Agent Thomas Calder, a broad-chested former Marine with salt and pepper hair cropped tight and a jaw perpetually shadowed in stubble. A jagged scar crossed from his right temple to cheekbone, a souvenir from a deployment gone wrong when corrupt officials sold troop positions to insurgents. That betrayal hardened him. Today's mission wasn't paperwork to him, it was personal redemption, one takedown at a time. His voice rumbled low through the radio. Team Alpha on Town Hall, Team Bravo to the Sheriff's Station. Execute. Inside his Grand Lakeside home, Mayor Gregory Knox stood in a kitchen of polished granite and imported tile, sipping his morning coffee. He wore a robe of expensive wool, looking more banker than politician. But his face, once confident, had aged years overnight, drained of arrogance and chased by sleepless fear. Margaret stood near the window, hands clasped tight, breath misting the glass. She didn't turn when the doors broke open. Agents poured in. Knox's mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile like brittle pride. His jaw trembled beneath trimmed gray stubble, bravado gone, only the hollow shape of a man who had believed power was invincible. A voice rang out. Gregory Knox, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, coercion, and violation of federal land protection statutes. His knees buckled, not from dignity, for he had none left, but from the sudden recognition that the empire he built out of greed now collapsed at his feet. Margaret's lips pressed into a shaking line. She looked neither triumphant nor afraid, only free. Sheriff Kent was seized at his office a breath later. He tried laughter first, mocking, puffed-up echo of the bully he once was, but it died when Agent Marlowe's eyes met his. Sheriff, she said coldly, your appointment is revoked. Kent's swagger evaporated. He did not argue. He simply sagged like a deflated suit, cuffed and hauled into the snow, where townsfolk watched in stunned silence. Derek Collins lasted longest, but not by courage. He was found at his warehouse among gleaming snowmobiles and crates of stolen equipment, hair disheveled, fury sputtering behind pale, puffy cheeks. You can't... Do you know who... he sputtered, but his voice wavered, pathetic under the echoing rafters. Ranger, ears raised, tail stiff, watched through the doorway beside Ethan as Derek was dragged out. Derek's dream of land, power, and easy wealth collapsed into frost. The storm had been brutal, but morning belonged to truth. A month passed, winter softened, snow melted into rivulets that traced new paths along rocky slopes and down into the river, as though washing the sins of Iron Ridge away. Roofs shed white layers, icicles shrank to glass tears. Inside the Hayes cabin, warmth glowed golden. Samuel Hayes, thinner now but alive with quiet peace, rested in his armchair, a knit blanket draped over his legs. His lined face relaxed by the hearthlight. The bruise that once marked humiliation long faded. Still, his eyes kept a gentle shine, of relief, of gratitude, of pride too deep for words. Outside, Ethan knelt in the yard, stacking pieces of split firewood for spring storms. Snow melted on his jacket shoulders, leaving tiny dark circles. His posture was still soldier-sharp, but his expression was lighter, like ice thawing after a long freeze. Ranger trotted nearby, a scar-marked guardian now running like a pup, letting children toss sticks he never pretended not to catch. Laughter drifted, soft and bright as bells, an unfamiliar but healing sound. Small children from the neighborhood played in the yard, one girl with ginger curls and cheeks freckled like constellations, a boy with mittens too big who admired Ethan with wide hero eyes, a toddler toddling on oversized boots, squealing when Ranger bowed playfully. Their parents watched from the fence line, gratitude softening tired faces. People smiled more now in Iron Ridge, quietly at first, then freely. Ethan returned indoors, brushing snow from his boots before taking Samuel's hand gently into his calloused one. Samuel looked up, his voice worn but strong. "You've carried war to places without names, but here," he squeezed Ethan's fingers, "here, you brought peace." Ethan let the silence sit, warm and sacred. His gaze drifted to the window. Ranger sat proudly beside the children outside, tail flicking, head held noble against the slowly thawing world. "A warrior protects his home first," Ethan murmured. "Sometimes the battleground isn't across an ocean. Sometimes," his voice lowered, "it's on your own porch." Samuel smiled softly. Outside, Ranger let out a single sharp bark, alert but calm, as if to say, "The town is safe now." Winter's grip loosened, dawn grew earlier, and the quiet promise of spring settled gently over Iron Ridge. The storm had come. The storm had passed. Justice remained, standing tall in the snow's fading glimmer, waiting for whatever new dawn the mountains would bring. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with angels or shining lights. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of courage, truth, and the simple strength to stand when the world expects you to stay silent. In life, we may not all be soldiers, and we may not all fight in mountains of snow, but each of us faces battles, in our homes, in our towns, in our hearts. And when darkness seems heavy, remember, God doesn't always calm the storm immediately. Sometimes He sends someone to walk through the storm with us. Sometimes He makes us strong enough to calm it ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may feel hope again. Comment your thoughts below. Tell us who inspired you most in this journey of faith and courage. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that good still wins, love still protects, and God still works miracles through ordinary people every day. May the Lord bless you and your family. May He protect your home, guide your steps, and give you the strength to fight for what is right. And may every storm in your life end with His light breaking through the clouds. Amen.